I'm Natalia Lobach, and this is Change Course. Rewards and recognition. One of the things we often talk about in change efforts is thinking about the opportunities for rewards and recognition as we work through and at different stages of the change. So some people think that rewards and recognition are things like end of project parties or donut days or, those kinds of things. And while I'm sure everybody loves a cupcake, it's not about giving everyone a cupcake trophy at the end of the change. Rewards are either intrinsic or extrinsic, and recognition is important in a social context. The other thing we need to remember is that when we're looking at change through the lens of behavioral science, a reward is not always a gold star, a pat on the head, a trophy. Sometimes a good deed is its own reward. Let me explain what I mean. So when I'm working specifically in IT implementations and looking at very difficult technical change, the mastery and the understanding and being able to do something right, to be able to learn it, to feel that excitement once it works, once you get it to work, and once you've done that behavior and it actually happens, that in itself is a reward. And when we look at what happens when we encounter a situation that's rewarding, we might be frustrated, and then we are able to fulfill the action. We're able to do it. We've learned it happened, and our brain gets this little dopamine spike that, we get as humans when we learn a new skill and we feel like we have done a good job. Similar to when, we're playing a game and we get a goal. Scoring a goal is a huge dopamine rush. So in modern day, when we're looking at implementations of systems and processes, it's really interesting when we start to think about things like gamification and we start to look at behavioral modification from a game lens. So I know I have talked about this book before, but Nudge is a really interesting look at this. And as we lean into system implementation, there are lots of ways to gamify within a system. Some of these things can be built into the processes. So things like recognition or game type rewards that happen when things are executed correctly. We've all seen it, when, online shopping has actually mastered this to a T, where once you submit your order, the next screen gives you a shower of stars and confetti saying, "Yay, you've submitted your order." I mean, that feels just really fantastic, doesn't it? Even though, we've forked over another couple $100. So these types of things are what are helping people to engage and stay engaged in the system. Furthermore, we can also think about how we as leaders or people reward, quote unquote, the behaviors that we want to see. One of my favorite essays of all time in this realm is entitled What Shemu Taught Me About a Happy Marriage. And it ran in the New York Times. I'll link this one in the show notes. It is absolutely fantastic. And in short, it's a story of a wife who is frustrated with her husband, but has this incredible opportunity of working with exotic animal trainers in a research facility. And so starts to learn about behavioral modification and how rewards for humans and other animals actually work. And so I talked previously about behavioral extinction and planned ignoring. Planned ignoring is part of the reward structure. So do we reward or condone certain behaviors? Do we need to change how we respond to some behaviors? And what are the behaviors that we want to reward or encourage? And often things like positive affirmation and attention can be rewards in and of themselves. You don't need to go around handing out gold stars or things like that. It can also be a word of support and recognition from a senior member of the team that creates that reward. Lastly, recognition. And recognition is really social proof. What I mean by social proof is that when you have a situation where there's a lot of reward happening, and reward can start to get a little bit repetitive and a little bit stale. Again, read the essay. It has a lot of really good insights into, how heightening rewards and figuring this system all out actually works. So recognition is where you provide the reward, but you provide the reward in a social setting. And this is important for two factors. Number one, because it's a reward. And number two, it's highly valuable because it's visible. Visible to others in the organization, visible to peers in the same social group, and also visible to people who have power. And so recognition is an incredibly powerful tool to help bed down and reinforce behaviors that we want to see. Recognition can also be a bit of a double-edged sword, depending on how it's done. And, it's really important that recognition is also viewed as being equitable and fair. So that's the double-edged sword of recognition. So it's one thing for leaders to stand up and say, in front of a social group, we recognize this person for these great things that they have done. And for that person, it's incredibly valuable because it's in front of peers and in front of people with power. But what is equally important is if their peer group agrees that they are deserving of that recognition. And so what happens is you get an acceleration where using recognition can also help accelerate the group. Because if the group agrees that the individual deserves to be recognized, they also recognize that this individual has set a standard to which they can strive. So, considering rewards versus recognition, some of the ways that you can use this in your change is, as I've mentioned, working it into the actual system and process. So having those intrinsic rewards that are related to mastery of a skill, learning something new, achieving a goal, doing something that we set out to do and that we were working on. That's the intrinsic reward. Extrinsic is when it comes from somebody else, so a person in power, a peer, and recognition, again, a type of reward, but also needs to come from the people in power, needs to be visible to peers and to others in power, but also needs to be supported by those peers such that the peers say and agree with leadership that this person is deserving of recognition. That's why there's often nomination programs around recognition. But honestly, I think some of those fall short where a lot of people are nominated and then leadership has to choose. What I would actually prefer to see is that the peers provide and nominate the person they think should be recognized. And, this can work really well, but again, it has to work in very high trust environments for it to be effective. I'll get into more of that in another episode, but I hope that this was helpful. Certainly read the essay, What Shamu Taught Me About a Happy Marriage. It is both parts hilarious and enlightening. And if you're interested in this area of reward and using reward to modify behavior, do pick up Nudge and give it a read. I think you'll find it very interesting and enlightening. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, I invite you to like, rate, share, and subscribe because it helps others find us. Our music is Levity by Emily Clausen. Change Course can be found wherever you get your podcasts, and we have an accessible version with fully edited captions on YouTube. You can find the link to this version on www.charthouse.ca in the Change Course podcast show notes. While you're visiting us, sign up for the Change Navigator newsletter. We're launching shortly, and you'll get a monthly dispatch of all things change and hear about the upcoming launch of ConnectedChange.com. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to change course.